She's the Chief Operating Officer with Astria. As a customer-centric, well-rounded senior executive with a track record of accelerating operational and financial outcomes, he began his career as a mechanical and software engineer. After business school, he worked as a consultant for McKinsey and as an executive at General Electric, where he held rising roles of responsibility. And he holds an MBA from the University of Chicago, both School of Business, and MSME from the Ohio State of University, and bachelor's degree in engineering from the Indian Institute of Technology. He's a certified Six Sigma Green Belt. Can we welcome Annie with big round of applause?
Thank you. Before I start, I actually want to acknowledge the organizers of the conference. It's a very well-run conference on time, and I also want to thank the speakers. I mean, they are such well-researched and thoughtful presentations this morning. So can we join and give them a hand? So I'm here to talk about, where managed services will go from here, since we are a leading IT managed services provider around the world. And I would like to start with a quick introduction about us. So we are, Astria is headquartered in San Jose. We have about 2,300 employees around the world. We support 250,000 customers. Our key clients are, some of the largest tech giants and Fortune 50 companies. So there's a lot of, IT services and outsourced services expertise that we have that, I'm going to rely on to talk about some of the things that we see. We provide 5 kinds of services. So, you can read them. Service desk, AV, IT logistics, data center and networking, and then at the bottom, next-gen digital engineering. So this is a rapidly growing organization, but we have a lot to still learn as we grow. And today's presentations have been great, and I'm looking forward to meeting many of you later today to exchange thoughts. This is a so actually before I go into that slide, I would be curious, for those of you who are in shared services, how often has it happened that you outsource services to multiple vendors? And Bhaskar, you talked about earlier, and Ron was talking about, the movement from cost cutting to value delivery, right? So if you have multiple vendors doing things for you, how often does that go against those two objectives? Anyone want to comment on that? So I'll give you my experience, right? I mean, you basically what happens is, nobody owns the responsibility, right? So what we believe is there is this, convergence of being the, one-stop shop where, we can provide, the entire gamut of services. So this was something that we did for a Fortune 50 tech giant, right? And for the data center, we not only provided the rack and stack, but we went in the environment management, tools development, testing and reliability, and the full gamut, right? And that basically allowed us to cut their cost by 40%, and the time to delivery was improved by 30%, right? So that's where we see a hyper convergence, of these services sitting where we are. So now getting into the managed services market, I don't know how many of you have seen this this chart from Gartner. I was actually surprised by the 3.5% CAGR that it shows. I would have expected that growth rate to be higher. Also, when you look at the various parts of this market, and you see the 2022 growth versus the 5-year CAGR that is projected. Always what fascinates me is, somebody comes out with a forecast. In fact, in my life, one of my earlier jobs, they asked me to forecast oil and gas prices. And I said, that's a crazy request, right? Because if I knew that, I would buy and sell oil and gas and I would be retired on the beach, right? But you got to have a point of view. And so I would be curious, is this, from where you sit, is there something here that surprises you? You would have said it should be different? Or, does this align with, your view of the world? Or are you saying that whatever Gartner says is right? I used to be with Gartner, so they are a bunch of talented people, right? So it's not good to challenge them, but everybody has their own perspective, right? So I'll take that, silence is you agree with it. I also, wanted to talk about some economic trends, right? So this chart is from McKinsey, and I used to work with them a long time ago. So if you look at the turmoil that's going on, I think Bhaskar, you talked about it this earlier, right? This whole Great Resignation, and the cost of employee turnover is estimated at 30% of an employee's salary, right? So that's a lot. I mean, you invest in them, you train them, there's a network of people, as we just heard, and suddenly, these people start leaving, right? And how are you going to, this young generation has different, way of looking at the world. So, there's a lot of turmoil going on. So that's clearly a challenge. We are also seeing inflation that we had never, at least in the US, we had got used to 2 to 3% inflation. So there's a lot of scrambling going on to adjust with it. And so I think, here, because the Indian environment has been, more inflationary, there may be something that the companies from here can teach the rest of the world on how to deal with that kind of a inflationary environment. But that's going to be an interesting challenge, and I'm going to ask you some questions about these trends and where you think these are going. But before I do that, this is nothing new. The US stock market has gone through another one of those horrible situations, right? And it's kind of you've seen the repercussions of that around the world. So as you think about these trends, the question becomes, the war for talent, who's going to win, right? Because there's this limited talent pool and everybody wants that same talent pool. How are we going to win, right? What are the right things to, right ways to keep those people, in the company, right? So is it about giving them career development? I mean, you talked about, you're from HR, right? So is that going to be the lever? Is this going to be always resulting into, more and more salary increases? And, I've never seen an employee that says I'm paid enough, right? So where is this thing going? How are clients and vendors going to share the impact of inflation, right? Because if you just keep telling the vendors that your prices cannot change, at some point the vendors are going to go out of business. You look at the automotive industry, right? In the US, a bunch of, first the suppliers collapsed and then their customers, which were the big 3 OEMs, collapsed, right? So it's kind of an ecosystem that works together, right? So if the ecosystem doesn't work together to, solve these problems, we've got a challenge coming at us. The third thing is, if you think about industries and clients, right, who are going to be the winners versus losers, right? So it's a strategic thought that you got to put in, especially if you are not, staying in one industry, or even if your vendors are from multiple industries. That's going to be an interesting question. And the last thing is, how will globalization be affected, and how would that impact the MSPs from India, right? So there are many things. I mean, I get excited every time I come back, and how rapidly India is developing, and the kinds of things that are getting developed here, and there's a lot that we can teach from here to the rest of the world. It's not just about BPOs anymore, right? So it's really great to hear the kinds of things that are being taught, from this morning's presentations, and hopefully, I'm going to look forward to this afternoon's presentations. Any thoughts or comments or questions on this page? Or is it too late in the day to you just it's time for lunch soon? Come on, don't be shy. Yeah.
Very interesting slide, and you also made a very interesting comment on a previous slide where we heard you say that I mean, not maybe not this one, but maybe don't have to jump to that slide.
Okay.
But you did mention that the way this younger generation is behaving, I think that makes me a little upset being a HR guy. That this particular first question you're asking, war for talent, who will win? I think we have to believe that we are in buyer's market. We're not in seller's market anymore. And we can't copy from what Google is doing or what cool companies are doing, so-called. And again, with great respect to them, we have to know who we are and what we can do. And I can give a very small example. In the company that I work for, when we did a research, we found out 2 very unique ways of retaining people. I mean, you talked about impact of inflation. It's not only vendors. In our company, we are not unionized, but still, we launched something called as inflation assistance program.
Yeah.
So for somebody who's below a certain threshold, you can pay them. Or maybe looking at the average age of people. Of course, we didn't do a survey how many of them are conceiving family, but yes, we just announced a 4-week paternity leave.
Yep.
So I think, long story short, the comment I'm making is we're in buyer's market. We don't have to get carried away by Googling some of the solutions. You can get influence from them, but you have to know your people and implement something that works for you, and don't just do control X and or maybe cut copy paste. That's not going to work.
Yeah, that's such a great comment, right?
Thank you.
Pretty much for every impulse or opportunity or risk that you see in the market, we all have to come out with our own answers, right? Based on where we are in the market, what our size is, and you're absolutely right, right? Whether you're looking at the young generation or people who are really making a trade-off between whether to buy groceries or buy gas or whatever else. So you gotta respond to that in your own creative way. And I love the fact that you said it's now, at least now, it's a buyer's market, right? So we got to respond. So when we look at managed services, right? We look at this is the short term, or I guess the 5-year growth rate of these services, and this is a long-term projection again from Gartner. And we see that CIOs are increasingly outsourced managed services. They're focusing on the core. They are demanding performance. Pandemic has led to remote work, and now people are coming back to the office. So it's driving all kinds of craziness in the office. It's not clear. There is the more number of CEOs I talk to, there's still a pretty wide spectrum of people saying 100% are coming to office. Sometimes they're trying to get 100% to office, but people are not cooperating. Right? It's this dynamic. It's going to be clarified in the next, I would say, 6 to 12 months as to where the dust settles. And so, to be seen. In terms of outsourcing markets, we see growth in application managed services, infrastructure managed services, hardware support. So, there is a saying in Chinese culture that says, may you live in interesting times. We are definitely, right? The top trends in the IT managed services that we see, so I think, several speakers talked about value realization, right? So, can you really articulate your value, and can you really quantify the value, right? That's what the clients are going to look for, customers are going to look for. If you cannot do that in a commodity world, you're going to start competing on price, and that's a dead spiral. The second thing is, purchasing managed, what we call SaaS, right? So, it's about consolidation of services and bundling of services, being the one-stop shop, so that the CIO doesn't have to worry about a certain part of the operation, right? So that's the second thing we see. Result-based outcomes, right? So this is where you start gain sharing, and there are SLAs that you agree to, and you got to deliver to those SLAs, right? So I'm seeing nods in the crowd, so sounds like you're seeing these same things. And the last thing is, we see hyper-converged IT infrastructure, right? So an example of that would be, you combine the commodity server hardware, and you combine that with local storage, right? And that's managed by an intelligent software layer, distributed software layer, right? So that allows you to avoid some of the problems you see with legacy infrastructure, right? Such as security, for example, right? We talked about security before, about data. So, so that's kind of what we see in the IT managed services space. Any questions, thoughts, comments before we close? Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.